This is definitely the part that I think people feel we're talking about, and it's something that I don't think any female was taught about as a child, unfortunately. To be quite honest, I think up until like 5 years ago, I thought you could get pregnant at any point during our cycle because no one's ever even told us that, which is insane. But this is, I would say, one of the most important aspects for predicting ovulation.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Wellness Effect. And today we're diving into Fertility Awareness Method, also known as FAM. We're going to talk about what it is, why we think it's so important, and how to actually implement it in your life. And honestly, this is something I think every woman should understand, whether you're trying to get pregnant, you're avoiding pregnancy, or you're just wanting to understand your hormones a little bit better. We're kind of just fed all this information of how not to get pregnant. And that basically starts and ends with here is some birth control and have a nice day. And that's it. We're not ever really taught or explained to how fertility actually works, how our cycle's communicating with us, or why ovulation even matters. So, in this episode, we're going to break down what the fertility awareness method actually is, how your cycle, and I know we've talked about this before, but how your cycle acts like a monthly report card for your hormones, and then why learning to read your body can completely change the way you approach hormones, birth control, fertility, and just like your wellness in general. But I do want to say that this is something that we kind of help our clients implement. We're not experts in this, and it's something you really need to work through and take the time to learn. It's not like the first month you start this method, you're like good to go and you can not get pregnant, especially if you're using it to avoid pregnancy. So just take your time. And I want to mention right off the bat, there's a website. It's tcoyf.com, taking charge of your fertility. And she has a lot of information and also downloadable charts that you can use to start actually doing this method that we're going to kind of talk about today. So just check that out. We'll put it in the show notes. But I'm just going to dive right in. Does that sound good to you guys?
That sounds good to me, fam.
Okay, I know I'm like FAM. So what is FAM? So yeah, it's called FAM, the Fertility Awareness Method, and it's a body-based method of understanding when you're fertile and when you're not. So we're doing this by observing real-time signs from your body. We're not predicting, we're not guessing, we're just looking. And it's really about learning to read your cycle through a few key biomarkers. So mainly your basal body temperature, your cervical mucus, sometimes cervical position if you're kind of more advanced. But our body is giving us a lot of signals every single cycle that tell you exactly where you are hormonally. And what FAM does is teach you how to recognize those signals. And I think too, even for me, like talking about how different we feel in our luteal phase or how different we feel for ovulation. So even if you're not using it to get pregnant or to avoid pregnancy, like if you're not even having sex right now, it's just cool to know where you're at in your cycle and how you can just use that to support your body. Also, ovulation can shift. So if we're stressed, if we're not sleeping well, if we're under eating, if we're over exercising, if we're traveling, if we're breastfeeding, if, like all these different things that women are dealing with on a daily basis can shift our ovulation. So there are certain methods. I think it's called the rhythm method. And it's basically like you track for 3 months and then that's when you ovulate. But relying on that past data and assuming that that's going to be the same every single month is just really unreliable. So with FAM, you're observing, you're responding to what your body is doing in this cycle, not what it did every cycle, 3 months ago or whatever. It's not just for people trying to get pregnant. Like I said, it can be used to optimize conception, it can be used to avoid pregnancy. But ovulation is really a vital sign of the body. If you're not ovulating regularly, something is off in your body. It's something we want happening every single month, whether we care about getting pregnant or not. Hormonally, metabolically, neurologically, all these different things, it's so important for. So, like we said, your cycle is that monthly report card. It tells us what's going on with your progesterone, estrogen, thyroid function, stress resilience, minerals, even gut health. And we're going to talk a little bit more about those things. So this information is really, really important. This episode of The Wellness Effect is brought to you by Lifestyle You. If you're listening to this podcast and thinking, okay, this sounds like me, whether it's low energy, hormone imbalances, stubborn symptoms, or you just feel like you've tried everything, Lifestyle You is our root cause coaching program designed to help you actually connect the dots.
We use functional nutrition, personalized support, and functional lab testing to figure out why your body is doing what it's doing, instead of just guessing or slapping a Band-Aid on symptoms.
And because you're a listener of The Wellness Effect, when you use the code Wellness Effect, you'll receive a free functional lab when you join the program. If this episode is resonating with you, make sure to share it with a friend, subscribe to the podcast, and check out the show notes to learn more about Lifestyle You and how to apply.
So when you chart your cycle properly, you're going to start to see patterns like, are you even ovulating? And if you are, when? Is your luteal phase actually long enough? Are you making enough progesterone? Is there a specific stressor like, oh, maybe once every other month, go see your in-laws and then all of a sudden your ovulation is delayed? It's like, oh shit, maybe there's something specific that's delaying it. Are cycles, short? Are they long? Are they irregular? This is just really important. I think this is like baseline information that women should know about their bodies. And it can really be a cool way to kind of dip your toes into this space, especially if you've ever been told that you're like, everything's normal, you look fine, all your labs are normal. It's like, okay, I have this going on with my cycle. And it can kind of just let you start looking into things on your own a little bit. And from a functional health lens, FAM is really going to help. Every time I say FAM, I'm going to probably laugh. This method is going to help us start to connect the dots. Like I said, oh, when I go out drinking, my ovulation goes late. Or, when I do this one thing when my nervous system is dysregulated, or is it maybe mineral depletion, thyroid health, blood sugar balances? Your cycle isn't just this isolated thing. It actually reflects how supported or unsupported your body is. So we're going to talk more now. Lacey's going to take over, talk about why it's so important in all these other pieces of the body.
Yeah, and I think even like hearing you talk too, because I've been obviously tracking like my cycle every month for the last like 6 months, and it is just wild how much it changes. And it's not necessarily like I've had life-changing or altering news within the months where sometimes my ovulation is back, but like some days it's 18, some days it's 14, some days it's 16, and it's not anything crazy is changing in my life anyway. So it's been really interesting just like tracking it and seeing the fluctuations. And then like I kind of noticed my luteal phase was a little bit shorter, which kind of means you might not have good progesterone. And so I like did a couple changes with my diet to help support that. And then the next month it was longer. Like it was just been really cool to see how you can make those changes. But that's just more from like a personal standpoint. And I think it is very normal for it to change the day that you ovulate. So I think it's definitely better to use this method versus those other ones because it is very rare. Even if my cycle is the same length, which it often is, my ovulation day does fluctuate like 1 to 4 days every single month, which has been interesting. But let's kind of just go into why it's so important. And this is kind of where fertility awareness stops being about pregnancy altogether and starts being about health, because when you really understand the FAM method, you realize it's not actually a fertility tool first, it's a body literacy tool. And it's this idea that ovulation is a vital sign. And I actually seen a post on this the other day because it's not actually considered one of the vital signs. And so just so you know, your vital signs are like your pulse, your temperature, your blood pressure, pretty much things that if you did not have, something is very, very wrong. And so it's kind of this idea that ovulation is also a vital sign. It tells us whether your body feels safe enough, nourished enough, and supported enough to reproduce. And reproduction is not the goal, right? It is the signal. And so if your body isn't ovulating regularly, that's just information that you now have. It doesn't mean something is broken. It just means something is asking for support. And that even goes back to my example, right? It's like, oh, my ovulation was kind of delayed. It was later than it should be. And my luteal phase was okay. So I'm going to eat more carbs and I'm going to eat more of this. And like, boom, it came right back. So I didn't panic and go, oh my God, I'm broken. It's just like, oh, what can I do? What is my body asking for? So it feels safer, because that is, I don't want to say the point of women is to reproduce, but it's a big part of why we're here. And it's what we're created really to do. And so if we're not safe or our body doesn't feel safe, it's not going to do that. And something that we talk a lot about or say a lot, especially to our clients, is just like when you chart your cycle, it's not just bleeding or like your period, right? Which I think is what a lot of us kind of, when we're first starting to learn, that's all really we pay attention to. But you're tracking whether your body is having that full hormonal conversation each month, and all of the hormones are where they should be when they should be. So you're going to experience your estrogen rising, ovulation occurring, progesterone being produced, and then a period arriving as a result of all of those different things that are happening in this cohesive hormonal dance, we'll say.
I liked when you said conversation. That's cool because it's like, okay, this gets told and this gets told. And then the conversation is a back and forth. And if someone just like ends it, it's over.
Well, and I always like to say that that's what our hormones are. They're just communicators, right? And you don't want to shoot the messenger. So it's like you got to figure out who's messing the messenger up because it's not them, right? And so we always share that like our cycle is your monthly report card, and every single cycle does give you that feedback. Like, how long did it take you to ovulate? Did you ovulate at all? Was your luteal phase long enough? Did you feel calm, anxious, exhausted, inflamed, energized? Like, your body is reporting back to you every day on how supported it is hormonally, metabolically, emotionally, and neurologically. And this is where the FAM becomes incredibly powerful because it allows us to spot early warning signs before they fully crash. And like a big one for a lot of women is low progesterone. And progesterone is the hormone of keeping us calm and helping us sleep and helping us feel stable and resilient. And when progesterone is low, women often experience things like anxiety, poor sleep, PMS, spotting, short cycles, or difficulty maintaining a pregnancy because progesterone is pro-gestation, like literally the hormone that you need for that. And so with fertility awareness, low progesterone shows up clearly through a short luteal phase, unstable temperatures, or symptoms that consistently appear after ovulation. And so without charting, that pattern often gets missed, right? Like, it's going back to my own example. I almost always have 28 to 30-day cycles, like religiously. I don't often go longer than that or shorter than that. And so if I was just like, oh, I bleed on the same time every 28 days, I would think that I was great. But then tracking my cycle over the last 7 months, I noticed, oh, sometimes my luteal phase is 10 days, sometimes it's 12, sometimes it's 14. Like, what did I do these months where it was longer versus when it was shorter? Because you do want it to be long enough so that you can get that enough progesterone. And so it's just been really interesting that way to look at it. But another big one is estrogen dominance, which I think is also very common, especially when progesterone is low. Usually means estrogen is high because it's more to do with the ratio versus how much estrogen you actually have. So what I mean by that is, with estrogen dominance, you could technically have low estrogen, but still be estrogen dominance. It's more in relative to your levels of progesterone. So in FAM, estrogen dominance can show up as long cycles, delayed ovulation, heavy periods, breast tenderness, migraines around that ovulation time, or cervical mucus patterns that don't quite make sense. And your cycle is, again, just giving you clues long before you even have to take a lab or get your hormones tested. And then the next kind of thing that we see come up is anovulatory cycles, where bleeding happens, but ovulation actually never occurred, which I didn't even realize was a thing. I thought you couldn't bleed if you didn't ovulate, but that's not true. So this one is huge because so many women like me assume if they're bleeding, they're cycling normally, but without ovulation, there is no progesterone, and without progesterone, there's no hormonal balance. And so when you're bleeding but not ovulating, those are super common during very high stress or postpartum, or when you're breastfeeding or you're under eating or you're over exercising, PCOS, thyroid dysfunction, and mineral depletion. So again, like all of those things I just listed, your body isn't going to want to get pregnant when all of those things are going on. You just had a baby, so you're postpartum and breastfeeding, you're under eating, you're over exercising. Your body does not feel safe to bring a baby into this world. Therefore, you're not actually ovulating. And so again, the fertility awareness method makes this visible. And when you have that visibility, that is when you really hold the power and you know what you need to do next. And so lastly, we'll talk a little bit about just thyroid and stress because they're also deeply intertwined with the cycle. So ovulation requires a certain level of metabolic safety. And if that body perceives stress, whether that's emotional stress, blood sugar instability, lack of calories, poor sleep, chronic inflammation, whatever it is, ovulation is one of the first things to be delayed or shut down, right? So like right away, your body's like, nope, not this month. So when ovulation keeps happening later and later, when cycles get longer, when your temperature is all over the place, that's often not a hormone problem. That's a stress and thyroid conversation, right? And you've heard us all say that a lot, like hormones aren't root cause. Hormones are just the messengers. You were not just the chosen one that got hormones that were off. Something you're doing in your environment, in your habits, whatever it is causing your hormones not to message the way that they should. And so I think that's just like a really important understanding that a lot of people don't understand is, and it's also like empowering and cool because it also means we have the power to change it. We just have to figure out what it is, right? It's not like you're just victim to your hormones. You have no control over them. There's so many things that we can do. But when you get to this point, your body really is just prioritizing survival over reproduction, which is actually incredibly intelligent. And something as I've been kind of like navigating my fertility journey, I heard this on a podcast because we all do know those people, they live on the streets, they're super, super unhealthy, and they just get pregnant like that. And it's not a big deal. And we're like, how, when I'm like this super healthy person, my body still doesn't feel safe. Like it doesn't make sense. But on this podcast, they were saying that when those people do get pregnant, it's a good thing that your body's not getting pregnant when it doesn't feel safe, because it means at that point where it can actually tell and prevent it, where a lot of people are just so disconnected from their body that their body will just get pregnant, even though they maybe quote unquote shouldn't have been able to, or their body wasn't actually ready for it. So that's just like helped me understand that mindset when you kind of get into those holes of like, why? So I think it's cool, right? It's very intelligent that your body has the ability to do that. And this is again where fertility awareness becomes just like a bridge to functional health, because we're not just asking what hormone is low, we're asking why doesn't my body feel safe enough to ovulate? Which brings us to how this all connects to minerals, our favorite topic. So ovulation, again, on top of everything, is energetically expensive, right? Progesterone production is mineral dependent, and blood sugar regulation, adrenal output, thyroid conversion, all of that requires a certain level of minerals. And when women are depleted, which 99.9% of us are, we have the stats to prove it. When we're depleted from chronic stress and pregnancy and breastfeeding and birth control and dieting and poor digestion, whatever it is, the cycle is often the first place that depletion shows up, because we don't need to have babies to survive. You know what I mean? Like we don't. And so your body's not going to be like, oh, I'm going to prioritize having a baby when I don't even have enough minerals to do X, Y, and Z, right? It's just going to be like, no, not prioritizing it, shutting it off. Let's move on. And so that will show up when you have late ovulation or weak luteal phases or missing cycles or intense PMS. And FAM allows us to just see the effects of that mineral depletion in real time instead of waiting for symptoms to get really loud, because again, it's usually one of the first indicators before you start losing your hair or getting really bad skin or whatever it is. It's like it's probably going to be telling in your cycle.
Yeah, and I think it's cool because we think cycle, we're like, oh, well, is my period long or short? But it's like when you start actually looking at all the pieces of your cycle, like what Lacey just said, there's so many clues in there. And it's like we think we have to go to the doctor and get blood work to get an idea of what's going on with our hormones. So even just to shift it in your head of like, whoa, this is a really cool, free way that I can look and try to figure out what is going on with my own hormones in my body. And I think that's so cool. Because it's like you got to go to the doctor, you got to get a lab test. It's like we as women have this gift of our cycles that tells us literally what's going on in our body. We just kind of sometimes you have to decode it, which can be tricky, but the first step is just having the information there on paper.
Yeah. And this is a slight side tangent, but I've been just wanting to talk about it because one of my lures of life is just my super painful period cramps that I just have not been able to crack the code on, and been doing a ton of just reading and research. And it was even interesting because with me, with my cramps, they start immediately as I get my period. I don't have any symptoms prior to when my period comes. I don't get bloated. I'm not inflamed. I am strong. I don't get moody. I'm like slightly emotional, but I have like zero symptoms. And then day one, most intense pain I have ever experienced every single time, no matter what. Day two, completely fine again. And so I was just been doing even research on that. And I actually learned that that means it's not hormonal. It's to do with the shedding and the lining of the uterus. And it's like the proglasticlins or whatever that name is, and they say this is like experience like early contractions in labor.
I was going to say, when you have a baby, you're going to be like, this is a piece of cake. It's going to be so easy for you.
Because I started thinking like, maybe I have endometriosis and that's why I'm struggling. And so I went down that rabbit hole, and they say, no, like when you get your period cramps and they're just that short time and they start immediately when you start bleeding, like not even 10 minutes before, it's all to do more with like how you're shedding that lining. And there's certain things that you can do to help that, which I'm trying to focus on. But I was like, oh, that's cool. Like I didn't even know that, right? Like you don't even think to do a little bit of research on the types of cramps that you experience. And are they all like lower fueled, but they last throughout your cycle? When do they arrive? Do you start cramping earlier? Do you cramp around ovulation? So it's just even cool to see that Chat GPT knew what I was talking about when I was like, it's just weird because they start exactly when I get my period. And so I just found that interesting. But anyways, I'm almost finished with why this is so important, but we do have 2 more left with nervous system. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about just gut and detox pathways. But your cycle is directly regulated by your brain. So the hypothalamus is constantly assessing whether conditions are safe enough to ovulate. And if the nervous system is stuck in fight or flight, ovulation becomes optional right away, right? And so this is why women can do everything right nutritionally and still struggle hormonally if their nervous system is chronically activated. And so again, charting often reflects this before women consciously connect the dots. So delayed ovulation during stressful months, or more PMS during emotionally heavy seasons, or better cycles during vacations or slower periods of life. Your chart does not lie, and it tells the truth that your body always knows. And that is it, right? Which I just think, again, is so cool. Because I remember one time when someone I used to work with decided to quit, and I like had this huge emotional reaction and I kind of forgot it. And then my period was like 6 days late that week. And I'm like, that's so weird. Like I wasn't stressed at all this month. And then Zach's like, oh, do you forget when you like cried for a week? So again, even your nervous system is paying attention, which is really interesting. So next, then there's metabolic health. So blood sugar stability plays a massive role in ovulation timing. And I think Jensen could speak a lot on this when her journey was just PCOS and her ovulation and everything, and how much she learned from tracking her blood sugar. But it plays a massive role in ovulation timing, progesterone output, and cycle, just how regular your cycle is. And so women who are under eating or skipping meals or chronically spiking and crashing blood sugar often sees that reflected in delayed or inconsistent ovulation. And FAM gives feedback on whether your metabolism is supported enough to sustain a cycle, which is just so interesting. And I think what we all learned through Jensen's experience is we don't all get a blood sugar spike for the same reasons. And it doesn't always mean you're eating a whole bunch of sugar all by itself right before you go to bed is what's going to cause a blood sugar. Like I think, Jensen, what was it? Like tacos or something for you was like crazy. Or
Well, it's like even potatoes for one person can be totally fine. And then for another person, even if they're considered low glycemic, can be like the worst thing they could possibly have. So everyone's so individual.
Yeah, blood sugar is a tricky little bitch.
it is, but so interesting. And then finally, gut and detox pathways. So estrogen has to be metabolized and cleared through the liver and the gut. And when digestion is sluggish, detox pathways are overloaded, or the microbiome is out of balance, hormones recirculate. And again, this can show up as heavy periods, clotting, worsening PMS, acne flares around the cycle, whatever it may be. And patterns that become obvious when you're actually paying attention to them. But if you're not, you're going to miss it. And so when you really zoom out, fertility awareness is not about controlling fertility. It's about understanding the state of your body. And it shows you how supported or unsupported your system really is. And once you can see the patterns, you can actually work with your body instead of fighting it. And that's why FAM is so powerful for women's health, because it does turn symptoms into information. And that's how you should be looking at it, because that is so much more empowering than playing the victim. Why me? Why me? Why me? It's like, oh, sick. I have so much data that a man would never have.
Not even with an aura ring.
But I think even too, and just all of the things I just went through, right? It can be so many different things. And there is a lot of like root cause possibilities. Is it your blood sugar? Is it your hormones? Is it your nervous system? Whatever it is. But try not to be so overwhelmed by that, because if we've learned anything, it's like the foundations support all of those and are going to support all of them. And so it's easier in terms of what you can do if you are dysregulated or your hormones are off or your gut is off or whatever it may be. But you just have to start paying attention and listening and really allowing yourself to look at it as feedback and that is it, and trying to stay more like level-headed with it or not play the victim game as much.
Yeah. But something I find so interesting is just like the gut correlation. I've been reading a lot about that lately, and just that like estrogen clearance and phase 2 detox. Like when we hear we have that estrogen dominance, we always like panic, and no one's ever like looking at your minerals and at your gut. And it's just so interesting because it's another one of those things that we're not thinking about when we have hormonal imbalances, right? But yeah, I definitely have a not different, but an interesting perspective on this because obviously I've been doing FAM for a long time and I still don't have a lot of the answers that I am looking for. Unfortunately, I have my data, but it hasn't really pointed me in the right direction yet. I shouldn't even say that. It's definitely pointed me in the right direction. I think it's just I haven't found what I need to do in order to kind of like fix those imbalances. But even for me, kind of what Lacey was saying, it's so important that like if you are trying to either like get pregnant or have a regular cycle or whatever that might be, is just really trying to look at it from an optimistic perspective. Like all of the data that you are getting, it's really easy to get bogged down about how it's not perfect, but that I think gets in the way even more of us being able to figure out what actually is happening. So as someone that's been on this freaking journey for 4 years and I still don't have a lot of answers, I know so much more about myself, and I'm so grateful for getting my IUD removed and like learning about myself. And it's truly the most like empowering thing I think a woman can do. So we're going to talk about the actual steps. If you've made it this far, you're going to get the real benefits to this. And this shouldn't take us too long, but what we're really going to do is just talk about, okay, what are the actual steps that we need to do in order to either figure out when we are ovulating or whatever. And one quick thing I also want to say is I liked what Kira said is just like, we're not relying on the last like 2 months of data because there are so many things that can change. We're really looking at like the signals our body is giving us in that specific cycle, and that is going to be much more reliable than the alternative, both for getting pregnant and not getting pregnant. I think it's funny that we're all like in complete different journeys of like our cycle and why we're using FAM right now. So the first one is awareness, of course, like it is with every other thing, but really just like observing what's happening on a day-to-day basis. And this is extremely foundational because we're paying attention every day. We're not just paying attention when we should be ovulating. We're not just paying attention when something feels off or when we're getting our period, but just those like day-to-day patterns, and that day-to-day awareness is going to be what allows us to see those fluctuations through each cycle. And so that daily observation is what helps like build that awareness and then figure out those patterns that are happening. And that's where that information is going to be. And I think it's really, really important that it doesn't mean that we're obsessing over every little thing. It's just noticing these patterns. So that's step number one. Step number two is taking your basal body temperature. BBT is what a lot of like people will call it in this space, but basically it's your resting body temperature. And you want to take it first thing in the morning before you get out of bed, before you like talk, scroll, drink water, go to the bathroom. Some people do use Oura rings, but the most reliable method is through an actual thermometer. Would you agree, Kira?
Yes. Natural Cycles came out with a band now that you can wear. So like I had at one point the basal body thermometer that I had to like put under my tongue every morning, and like you sit there for like a full minute. It's a struggle. But Natural Cycles I saw has like a band that you wear just to bed, and then it takes your basal body temperature for you in the morning, and then you're good to go.
And it's actually interesting, slight side note, is I've been doing a lot of reading or research on just how much our body temperature tells us about our health and our metabolism, and it's actually insane. So I just recommend for so many different reasons, but we won't go into that. But I almost think like your body temperature in the morning tells you literally how healthy you are and how well your metabolism is working. It's interesting.
Yeah. So I think for more like basic, like if you have a fairly regular, I should probably be doing like the band or the actual thermometer. And someone mentioned a band and I'm like, haven't even heard of that, but I really want to get it because I am so irregular. It would probably be better. But if you're just kind of like basic tracking, not trying to get pregnant, like an Aura ring or like the Ultra Human ring can be a good option for just noticing when it's spiking above normal or whatever that looks like. So yeah, what the temperature does is it confirms ovulation after it happens. So that's why we don't only want to rely on the temperature, because if we're only relying on that, there's a chance we're going to get pregnant, which is a good thing if you're trying to get pregnant. But if you're not, it's not such a good thing. And then it also tells us whether ovulation actually happened. So what Lacey was saying with like those anovulatory cycles, if you're not seeing that temperature spike, but you're getting your period, it might be a case of an anovulatory cycle, but it also might just be a case of you not tracking your temperature correctly, which is something I think is really common, especially if you're not very diligent with the oral thermometer. And then it also gives us insight into progesterone production as well. But yeah, it doesn't predict ovulation, it just confirms it. And so that's why we really want to be observational. And then step 3 is cervical mucus. And this is for me like the number one thing that I like know that even though it's late, my ovulation is here. And this is definitely the part that I think people feel we're talking about. And it's something that I don't think any female was taught about as a child, unfortunately. To be quite honest, I think up until like 5 years ago, I thought you could get pregnant at any point during our cycle because no one's ever even told us that, which is insane. But this is, I would say, one of the most important aspects for predicting ovulation. So our cervical mucus essentially changes throughout the cycle in response to estrogen production. And so as ovulation approaches, our cervical mucus is going to become a little bit more like slippery, stretchy. I'm going to use some intense words here, clear or creamy. And then what a lot of people call it is like egg white mucus, essentially. So it's like another really good way of describing it that I heard, and it really helped me be able to identify it because it's just crazy. You don't pay attention to it until you're looking for it. But basically when you're wiping and it feels like you could like keep wiping because it's so like slippery and mucusy essentially. And what that type of mucus shows is actually a really amazing sign for like overall health. And so it signals that fertility, it allows sperm to survive for up to 5 days, and it marks that opening of the fertile window essentially. And so when that mucus dries up and then the temperature rises, the fertile window has closed, which is really interesting. Anything you want to add to that, either of you?
So cool. I just remember mom saying to me once when we were a kid, like not a kid, but like a teenager probably, just like if you wipe and it's like whoop, slippery, like you can get pregnant, so be careful. I was like, oh mom, gross. Like don't ever say that to me again.
And I don't want to interrupt your flow, Jeb, so maybe we'll go into this at the end, but I realized we probably should have at the beginning kind of explained like you can only get pregnant on certain days, because it's like even what you said, most of us didn't know that till 5 years ago. We didn't know that till 5 years ago, and our profession, our career is in women's health. And so I think a lot of people still don't even understand when you can get pregnant, when you can't, what does that look like? And so maybe we'll go into a little spiel at the end.
Well, and like I remember someone saying like you can only get pregnant like 5 days of the month, and I was just like, oh sure, whatever you say, like that sounds like bullshit to me, but it's actually true.
It is. And I think once again, it just comes back to that conversation about birth control. And unfortunately, if you get put on birth control when you're 16 years old, there's no need for you to learn that. And so no one even teaches you that because it's like, well, you're going to go on birth control, so you don't have to worry about what's happening in your body. So now we're going to talk about just like your chart and kind of what you'll see. So this is where the patterns will become a little bit more noticeable. And what charting means, is we've used that term a couple times, is really just like recording. So we're recording our temperature, we're recording that cervical mucus, we're recording our bleeding, and then we're recording these symptoms like sleep, stress, illness, cramping. This is something that is so interesting to me, but like you can figure out, because typically I think every cycle you swap back and forth what side you're ovulating on. And when you start paying attention, like for me, I can tell I get a little bit of cramping around ovulation on my right side. And then the next time, if I record it, it's like the left side, and you can actually see it swapping back and forth, which is just crazy.
Well, and that was like so interesting when I had an ectopic pregnancy and I didn't have to have surgery, but sometimes you'll have surgery and they'll remove like the left fallopian tube. And then people will ovulate every other cycle because they just have the one tube, which is just, it sucks.
Yeah, I was thinking about you. I didn't know if you still would have had that even without surgery, but you didn't, because you didn't have surgery. You still have it on both sides?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So yeah, that's kind of like just one of those little things. If you're not paying attention to, you're not tracking symptoms, then you won't notice. And the last thing I want to say with that one is, I think as females, because it's really easy to feel just like a lot, we don't want to feel insane leading up to our period. That's not normal. But it is normal to feel a little bit more emotional, to feel things a little bit more intensely. We might have just a little bit more like water retention or cravings. And being aware of that, I think, helps take a lot of the pressure off ourselves, where you can kind of be like, okay, like I feel a little bit fluffier right now. It's probably just because I'm in luteal. Or, okay, I feel a little bit more emotional. Every single commercial is making me cry. Like, what's going on? I'm in my luteal. And that is important as well, because it is crazy just working with clients like clockwork. They're in their luteal phase and they spiral in their check-in. I'm like, okay, like, let's look at what time of the month it is. And they're like, no, it's not that. And then like the next week, they're like, things are great. I love it here. And I'm like, okay, I'm just saying, maybe let's pay attention to that. So it is really interesting. But once again, once we do this over time, you're not going to figure this out in like 1 month, and it'll take even longer if you don't have a regular cycle. But you can see like, okay, around when are we going to be ovulating? How long is our luteal phase? Whether our cycles are consistent, how that stress and that illness impacts our ovulation as well. And that's why we always say like the cycle is a monthly report card and it's feedback. And I think another thing is we say it's a monthly report card, but something that happened like 3 months ago, usually like some people say it's like a 90-day report card, can impact that cycle. And so that's something to think about as well. Fifth step is interpreting. So this is where that education is really important. And it's not just necessarily about collecting data, but understanding what that data means. And that's why we really recommend taking the time to understand this for yourself and what is going on, especially if you're doing it for TTC or pregnancy prevention, because that's what keeps it safe and honestly effective. And one of the resources Kira said, that's the taking charge of your fertility, right?
Yeah.
And then with the temperature rules is what often we call like the 3/6 rule. And so what that means is you look at like 6 temperatures before the rise, and then you confirm 3 consecutive higher temperatures after ovulation. And those temperatures must be higher than like the previous 6. And so something that can impact that, like if we get sick, we're going to see those temperatures go up a little bit. So that might be something you need to kind of like keep in mind as well, as if you're sick but your temperature is going up, it doesn't mean you're ovulating. But if we're feeling good, usually we would say that that is going to be kind of confirmation of ovulation. Step 6 is apply information based on your goals. So we've talked a lot about like how we're all kind of in different journeys, but if you are trying to conceive, obviously you're going to prioritize intercourse when you are fertile and when you see that mucus come and the temperature is spiked for the 3 days. And that's going to help stop guessing. And then it also helps reduce pressure, just like other days of the cycle. And then if you're trying to avoid pregnancy, you want to avoid unprotected sex during that time. And just make sure you communicate that with your partner. I think that's a really important thing too, that some women can sometimes feel a little like awkward about. But if you are with a normal functioning man, it shouldn't be that big of a deal and might be something to look a little bit deeper.
Maybe now would be a good time to just explain like when you can get pregnant and when you can't.
Are you asking me to?
Oh, I can do it if you know.
Oh, I thought that's kind of what she just...
Yeah, I thought that was what I just said. During that time when your cycle is like when your cervical mucus is high and like those 3 days after.
Yeah, I just more so meant like you ovulate after your ovulation is done that day, which is usually when you have like a lot different change in mucus and then you get your body temperature. So it's almost like confirming ovulation is a little bit hard because you don't really confirm it until after it's happened.
Well, the cervical mucus is when it's happening. When it dries up is after.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying is that's only 1 day.
The cervical mucus?
Yeah, it kind of like ramps up.
But as soon as it's there, like a little bit.
So usually it can be like 3 to 5 days. Yeah.
What I learned is like the day that you ovulate is 1 day. And then your egg drops and that's you ovulating. But when your LH starts surging, that's like a day before. And then you usually have like 24 to 36 hours after that. But you can get pregnant 5 days up towards your ovulation because the sperm can live and then your egg drops.
But you'll have that mucus for the days before you ovulate and temperature is after.
Yeah. So like those days leading up to it, like you may not be ovulating yet. And correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, because you're going to store the sperm, and the whole point of the sticky ovulation is to hold the sperm, or the sticky mucus is to take your sperm, takes it in there, sits there, and then it's waiting for up to 5 days, and then you ovulate.
Okay. Yeah, that's just okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll kind of go into that a little bit. So I think it is confusing and there's different ways to look at it. But truth be told, that when we start getting that cervical mucus, that doesn't mean that we're ovulating. We ovulate on one day, but when we get that cervical mucus is kind of when you're in that zone of when you can get pregnant, your fertile window, if you will. And so when we start to have that mucus, that's when you want to start either being proactive and use protection and or start to have sex. And so that's what you want to do. And then usually on the last day of that cervical mucus, and when that dries up, that's when ovulation is over. And then we'll see that temperature spike afterwards.
Yeah, and just making sure, and that's why if you're using this to try to prevent pregnancy, you do have to be a little bit more careful and just use protection, like even just the week. So when you start finding out how your ovulation works, like maybe you've been doing this for a few months and you're like, okay, I know what's going on. Now I understand. Okay, this is my cervical mucus. It's doing that. And then 4 days later, I have that spike showing that I ovulated. Maybe you're like a 6 day, everyone's really different. I wonder what the percentage is for this method if you do it properly of like effectiveness.
I think I've seen 90.
Okay, so 90. So just like being aware that we are just watching our body and it might not be perfect. So it's probably, if you are using this to try to prevent pregnancy, I would say it's best to just be on the careful side.
And I think even explaining, because I think we were off camera when we were saying that, is the sperm can live up to 5 days. So it's usually like 5 day window of you should be having sex or you should be avoiding sex. And if you're trying to not get pregnant, like maybe do 8 days or a 10 day window, which is, again, you don't really know when it's going to happen, but we all have that friend or know that person that's like, I got pregnant on my period. I don't know what you're talking about, but no, you didn't. You were still bleeding, but your period was technically over because sometimes your day one of your cycle is when you shed that lining, and then you can bleed up to 5, 7 days, some of us, and you can ovulate early, which is what happened. So they might have ovulated early and they were still technically bleeding when they had sex, but then the sperm lived in the mucus and then they got pregnant. So it's like some people are confused, but you can't get pregnant on your period because you can't get your period and ovulate at the same time. We all know that, right? Like, I got pregnant on my period, and it's like, no, you didn't. You might have been bleeding still and you ovulated really early.
Yeah, because you don't necessarily get pregnant the day that you have sex unless you nail it and you're exactly ovulating. It's like, oh, I don't know if that ever happens. But for me, like with my pregnancies, remember that one time I got pregnant like 5 or 6 or 7 days before I ovulated? So that was crazy. So just if you're using this as they call it TTP, trying to prevent, then just err on the side of caution.
Yeah. And I think Aura Ring and Natural Cycles is just such an easy, good place to start because it's a low lift habit. You don't have to do anything. And it is pretty accurate. It's not perfect by any means, but it is pretty accurate, especially the longer that you track your cycles. It kind of learns your cycle also. So, anyways.
And if you have a regular cycle, then it's just like so much easier.
And it will tell you too, like, you should try an ovulation strip today and see if you're ovulating. And you're like, oh my gosh, yes. And you can literally put a picture of your strip in there if you're having your LH surge. And I think it's a bit more expensive, like $100 a year, but it's just an easy way to start, like Jensen and Lacey and I mentioned, just like adding up those symptoms and getting that data in there. And you're just all of a sudden like, oh, I've seen the last 6 cycles, like this happened or whatever.
Yeah. Like you said, people get upset because you have to pay for that Aura Ring subscription, then you have to pay for natural cycles. But to me, like those costs are 100% worth the data that it gives me because it's so interesting with the Aura Ring. Then you can see, okay, luteal comes, my sleep all of a sudden is like tanked and all of these different things. I don't use LH strips. I used to at the beginning and I just found it to be not super helpful. But Kira, do you kind of want to maybe talk about how you use that? And then Lacey, I think you're kind of doing something different right now that would be good to chat about as well.
Yeah, so basically they detect the surge of that luteinizing hormone. So it's what's telling you your body is about to ovulate. So you'll see it looks just like a pregnancy test, and it's kind of confusing because on the strip there's the 2 lines, which like on a pregnancy test, that means you're pregnant. With these ovulation strips, we're looking for a surge in this specific hormone. So we always have luteinizing hormone kind of going on. And then right before we ovulate, it really surges. I remember I talked about this once on another podcast when I was like really not in a good place in my fertility journey. And I was tracking ovulation as soon as my period ended. So for like my entire cycle, every single day, twice a day, I was like not drinking. It was fucking crazy, to be honest. It was intense. but you could see the line slowly, gradually get darker, and then it would be really, really dark, and then you're ovulating for the 24 hours after you get that highest surge.
So that's another way to predict before with the mucus, would you say? But still, you can get pregnant before that surge.
Yes, exactly. So that was kind of what I was doing at one point in my journey.
Yeah, and honestly, what I'm doing is you're tracking your LH surge, but it's like a month kit that you can buy, and they're like $100, and there's different hormones that are tested in that. So it tests the PDG, which is the progesterone after you ovulate to confirm. So you have like a rise in your PDG after ovulation for a certain amount of days. So it's similar to like the temperature that will rise and pretty much rises right up until you get your period or you're pregnant. And then it also measures LH, but I like question if I should even say this because this is also just going to confuse people a little bit. But what I've learned since tracking my cycle is you can have false LH surges where your body thinks it's ready to ovulate or it's almost ready, and you kind of get that false sense. And then for whatever reason, the egg wasn't fully ready or in the right place or whatever, so it'll go back down. But I've learned I do that quite a bit. I've learned through tracking my own cycle. And so we would be like, oh, okay, my LH surge is here, because pretty much you have your LH peak, and then usually you have, I think it's 24 to 36 hours after that is when you ovulate. So that's kind of like, okay, peak time, ready to go now, because it's better to have sex prior so that the sperm is there waiting for the egg.
Does the same thing happen with temperature as well? Like you can kind of have those like 2 days and it's trying and it doesn't happen.
That's why that's the 6/3 is because it has to be the full. And that happened to me quite a bit. I would have like an early ovulation at like 9 or 10 days in my cycle, and then a second one, like a try to ovulate, not an actual ovulation. And then my real ovulation would be like day 19. I'm like, what the fuck?
Interesting. So this is just a little bit more like my story, but I feel like I have lots of times throughout my long cycle where my body's trying, and I notice it through the temperature spikes on my aura ring.
It's very interesting. I just think everyone should get, like, I think you should for sure, Jensen, just get like a couple of those kits just to see what is going on in the beginning. It can tell you like how much eggs you have or your
Ovarian reserve?
yes. But it's interesting.
Okay, last step. Sorry, this is a quick one, but it's just consistency. Kind of similar to like what we've all been saying, but you don't need to be like perfect with the charting. You don't need to like catch every single little fluctuation or sign, and you don't need to become obsessive. I think we've all become obsessive for different reasons. And for me, it like really forced me to like step back because it's so exhausting. And I can only imagine if you were trying to conceive how that would be amplified by like 1 million. So really just trying to be consistent and really just trying to be optimistic about all of these signs that you are getting. And it is a skill, like there's nuance to it. And that's why we're encouraging you to continue to do research, because I literally have learned even more things today just with like what you guys have said with your own experiences. And even imperfect like charting teaches you to become more aware about your body than most women have ever been in their entire lives. So there's nothing you're going to not get from it.
And you just learn to like also create your life around it, right? And it kind of gives you more of a permission slip, and you're not as hard as on yourself. Like even like Jensen said, during luteal for clients are like, burn the bridge, tear the house down. And not that even any of us are like, oh my gosh, cycle tracking or cycle syncing is the be all end all and you should create your whole life around it, because there are days where I am my strongest, happiest, most energetic, most outgoing when I am deep in my luteal phase. But I think for me, especially, it just more so give me that permission slip if I don't feel like doing something or don't feel like pushing myself or suck at the gym. I'm not like beating myself up. I'm more just like, I'm in my luteal phase. It's allowed. So yeah, just paying attention, and you just learn so much, and it's really cool and empowering how we have this much control and resources and information about what our body is doing. And it's just like, what has helped me is like realize how fucking complicated and like intricate our bodies actually are, and how many different things have to happen in order for one or two things to happen. And it's just like crazy when you don't prioritize your health, or you just think something is happening because it's happening. And it's like, no, man, there's so many things that have to go on that we don't even have to think about. Our bodies just do for us. It's like, wow, thank you.
Yeah. And it can be frustrating when you look at the people around you and they're just like have these quote unquote perfect periods, but also everyone's symptoms show up differently is what I always try to say as well. Like when you're like, well, this person doesn't take care of themselves and they have a regular cycle or they got pregnant really easily, it's just like Lacey said, it's sometimes not a good thing if you're getting pregnant and you're not metabolically healthy in all these ways we've talked about, but everyone has different signs of how things are going to show up for them.
And if you go to that website, that Taking Charge Your Fertility, if you're seriously doing this method, you should be printing off the sheets and like writing it down if you're not using the app. And if you are using the apps, they're going to tell you exactly what to do. Take your LH strip, what's your temperature, whatever. And if you're not, you need to print these pages off and like track these things, and it's all on there. So I really recommend, like, she has all these free downloads.
We'll put the website in the show notes. And then, yeah, we love Natural Cycles. There's a bunch of different other apps like Flow and whatever, but you want one that is syncing with, you can add your temperatures into it.
The TCOYF website, I actually was just on there creeping it last week, and she has an app now. I don't know much about it, but I'm assuming that it has space for your temperature and your LH and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's really cool.
And then Ultra Human Ring, sorry, just one thing, because I see a lot about that Ultra Human Ring. The only thing is that doesn't connect to any of these apps, right?
No, but it kind of has like its own within it. And even Aura's has gotten better over the years as well with just doing it. But the thing with the apps that are nice is they're definitely go on the side of caution. You know what I mean? So it's like your be careful window is usually like 10 to 12 days, when in reality it's really only like 5. So that's nice and a peace of mind if it's more so you're trying to prevent. I think doing the apps and everything is like all you really need to do, but you didn't hear that from me if you get pregnant.
My be careful window is like my whole entire cycle.
Yeah, that would just be so hard.
It's not going to give you much, but it's a place to track it.
But yeah, so good luck out there. Stay safe. And the best prevention is always just abstinence.
But anyway, if you guys like this episode, please rate, review, subscribe it. If you're watching it on YouTube, give us a little comment down there. We'd love to know what you think. Also, please watch this on YouTube. We have really low views on YouTube, like Lacey said last time. And click the bell so you know when we have a new episode on YouTube. We love you guys.
Stay well.
Goodbye.
Thanks for tuning in to The Wellness Effect. We're so grateful to be part of your wellness journey. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on Instagram for more tips, laughs, and real talk. We'll put all of our handles in the show notes. If you have questions or ideas for future episodes, slide into our DMs or send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep creating your own wellness effect.